What's up, guys? So this question here is the one that's been asked multiple times by Amazon. When I'm seeing the tags, company tags, it says Google, but almost everyone that I've spoken to, and personally myself also, this was the one that I got asked during my technical interview, and I really wanted to talk about this because it, it's pretty straightforward once you get the actual reasoning behind this question. So it asks, given a 2D grid where 1 represents the land and 0 represents water, count and return the number of islands. So pretty much 1 would be land and 0 would be water. And we can assume that the edges are also water. So that way, if we're looking at this, we can assume that the top are 0, the left is also 0, right, bottom, they're all water. They're all 0. So, with that being said, the intuition would be obviously go through the entire thing and then like do a bunch of for loops, but that's really messy. But if you've done a lot of grid work or depth first search, breadth first search, you know that the easiest way you can think of would be to use a breadth first search or a depth first search, and the easiest one and the most straightforward of these two would be to use a depth first search, a DFS. So what I mean by that, for example, since if we're looking at this specific question, 0 here, once we loop over the grid, 0, we don't care about 0, right? So we can just ignore it. And then when we get to 1, this is when we recursively call, we do a depth first search on this and recursively go over all the neighbors for the current land. For example, this is 1, and then depending if we go through the right or the bottom, say for the sake of this question, I go through the right. So I call DFS on the right, say it's 1. So change 1 to 0. And then what's the right side of this one? There's still 1. So I change this to 0 also. And then recursively call it was right. So there's nothing on the right. Now the bottom. So the bottom is also 0. And then I circle back. And then here I check this bottom side, this bottom side, and then right side there's nothing here, left side, bottom side there's nothing. So I recursively go over the left side. Now we're done. So this whole thing, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, it's all one big island. So we don't care about the shape. We don't care about nothing. As long as they're connected and they're surrounded by water, they're considered one island. Okay? And that's the most straightforward way. It's so easy. It might sound a little complicated once because I'm explaining it right now, but once I start coding it, you're gonna get how easy it is. And also in terms of time and space complexity, if we're looking at this, I mean, it's very straightforward because worst case scenario, or you obviously go through the entire array, go through all the columns and all the rows. So that's O of n times m. And space complexity, worst case scenario, we might have all 1s or we might have all 0s. So worst case scenario will also be O of n times m. So now jumping into the question, initially I really want to have the number of my islands, right? Number of islands. And I want to also have a helper function. I wouldn't really call it a helper. Honestly, this would just be our DFS function. So our DFS, yes, would take an I and a j, and this will recursively call DFS on I and j and all 4 directions. All 4 directions. And why all 4 directions? Because that's the only options that we have. So we can go up, down, left, or right. Cool? So this would be probably like 7 or 8 lines. And then this is where the simple looping over the grid, both row and column. And as we loop, we want to check for 1s. And F1, what we want to do is call df. Actually, what I want to do is first change the 1 to 0 and call DFS on the current one. So if we call DFS on this, just like I explained, it will recursively go through everything, do a depth first search, and return the number of islands, and we can increase the number of islands accordingly. So the code would be num island. We start from 0, and then my DFS would be taking the I and J, and then for now I'll just say return whatever, right? I'll keep this here, but I'll get back to it in a second. So I actually would also want to create a row and column. So that will be I'll get my rows this way, and then obviously to get my column, I'll need, if I can type today, get the column like this. Sweet. So now I want to loop over for I in range of n. So now we're through each column, through each row, and then I want to go through each column, and only if it's if the item that we're on, so if I and J, if it's a 1. So this is actually what I asked my interviewer also. So when I was doing this, when I got here, although I've done this question before, I was like, oh, I want to really sound smart. So I was like, can I assume that it's a number or is it a string? Because from the looks of it, it looks like a string. He's like, oh yeah, you can assume it's a string. So that's a little trick if you wanna use it in your interview. So if it's a 1, now if we're looking at this question, in terms of this question, oh Gert, I'm gonna have to fix this. In terms of this question, we don't even care about this, right? We don't care about this. But when we increase, so when we get through the second loop, when we get to 1, now what I wanna do is I wanna make this to become a 0. I was about to use comparison. 0, and now I want to call DFS, right? So now when we call on this, the DFS would execute. Now this is where the bread and butter is, right? Or actually, obviously we're going to take care of the number of islands here, but let's get to the DFS first. So if I'm looking at the DFS, so what do we want to do? First, we want to check the, I want to call it base case, that we would ignore, right? So that would be a base case. So if if I is bigger than 0, no, if I is smaller than 0, or, so it turns out I made a small mistake. I wouldn't do this here, right? I want to keep this as is, and then once I'm done with DFS, we'll get back to it. I was getting into little Java vibes here, but anyways, and then we have to check if we're in bound. So if it's out of bound for columns also, or say for example, I is bigger or equal to m, so it's out of bound in terms of rows, or it's out of bound in terms of column, right? And also, or the item that we're on, is is not a 1, right? If it's a 0, so or grid of I and J is not, actually I would just say a 0. If it's a 0, what we do, we just return, right? We don't care about that, so we can skip. Now else, this whole thing where I was making that 1 change to a 0 should happen here in the else statement. So that would be grid of I and J, the item that we're going on, should become a 0. And also now I want to go through all the directions. So I want to go to top, bottom, left, and right. So what I want to do, I want to call DFS for I and j plus 1. And I also want to call DFS on I and j minus 1. I want to call DFS on, let's see, I minus 1 because if it's I minus 1 will be through its left. So I and j, and then DFS would be I plus 1 and j. So this would take care of all the 4 directions. And here is when I take care of the islands. So plus equals 1. If we're looking at this question, when we're here, now it would recursively call. So when it gets here, actually before I do that, let me complete the code first, and then we're gonna talk about this example. So I'll just return the number of islands. Cool. So if we're on 0, nothing happens. It only executes if it's a 1. Now when we get here, okay, it checks. Now the number of islands is 1 at the first iteration. So we call DFS on it. This doesn't execute. And this would make it 0. And then it would call I and j plus 1. So we'll go on this, then go back, and then call this on this, because it's 0. But then goes on this, and then recursively go through the whole thing, and then circles back, goes to the left side, goes to the bottom side, and then so forth and so on. And if we execute, and before I execute, I want to say this is not the most efficient solution in terms of like how quick it is. Like it's probably like 8 milliseconds or something, but you could do it a lot faster. This is what got me in. So yeah, you do you. You could do a lot. You could optimize it, but I don't want to do it. I don't know how to do it. And this is wrong because I made a tiny mistake. Anyways. And I made another mistake, which is a small typo. Oh, and also, don't forget, I made a small mistake initially when I was doing this question. And it was that, well, we all know that if statement, it executes from left through right. And what I did during my interview is I got this grid and I checked if it's a 0 first, and then I did this, which would throw a index error, because if we don't check if it's in bound first and then we check this, it would throw a index error. So be very mindful. Make sure that check the bounds first before you check if it's a 0. Okay. And so I just didn't want to make the video too long. I made a few typos. So one was that I was passing row instead of column and column instead of row, and also I and I, but you get the gist. And yeah, that's pretty much it, man. Also make sure to talk through your reasoning. I honestly made these typos during the interview also, and I still got the offer. So they're not really looking for having the perfect answer at first, but they just want to see how well you communicate and how well you can talk through your reasoning and how well you're able to, I guess in a way, picture what's actually happening. So if you practice it enough, and if you are able to picture actually what's going on through each step, you're chilling, man. You're chilling. You're good. So yeah, get out there and crush it, man.